Forgot the auto start wasn't on for this stream. Almost started without realizing it. Okay. So we're gonna do something a little bit different today. This actually works better when the closer I am to being sleepy. But today we're gonna try. Oh, got the sign up already. Oh well, we'll keep it on. But today we're gonna try to do a little bit of a ASMR reading. It was suggested by someone in. Well, it's actually been suggested several times already. I was a little hesitant to try it because it's like, what am I gonna do, right? What am I gonna do? But I guess Aesop's Fables was requested for me to read. Another one was reading Wikipedia articles, which I'm like, why? Why should I do that? Anyway, but today, I guess we have something equivalent to a Wikipedia article. I have one of my textbooks from grad school, Medical Genetics 4th edition, as it is scrolling right now. So we'll be actually doing two readings because I put a poll up before this started. And it's more or less even. I should have just put two options there, to be honest. But anyway, today we are going to be doing two readings. Medical Genetics 4th edition. I'm going to be starting all the way from the forward and see how far we get in 30 minutes. After that, if I have any comments about it, I'll comment it along the way. But after that, I'm going to be doing Aesop's Fables, starting from the beginning, whatever that may be, and going and if I have comments on that, I'll do that along the way too. I am surprised the textbook also got as many votes as it did, but apparently it was a little bit different from the usual, whatever the usual is. I don't know. I don't listen to ASMR. But apparently I have a voice quality for it, supposedly. I don't know about that, to be honest. But anyway, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Should have a timer for myself. I could just look at the clock time, but I think the timer would be more accurate for just myself. Let's see. Okay, we'll do this. Also, I was suggested to put lo-fi music in the background, but no one's actually told me if that's a thing or not. So for now, I'm just going to have it silent. It's going to be just me and my voice, nothing else in the background. So this will actually work. Like I said, this works better the closer I am to being sleepy, but right now I'm a little bit refreshed, so it's not as mellow as I would like. We're gonna try. All right, let's get started. Timer on my side. All right, let's get started. So right now we are reading Medical Genetics 4th edition. Okay. Forward. JBS Haldane titled an anthology of some of his more dyspeptic writings. Every day has a history, and this is clearly applicable to the field of medical genetics. More than 200 years ago, scientists such as Buffon, Lamarck, Goethe, and Kielmeyer reflected on how the developmental history of each organism related to the history of life on Earth. Based on these ideas, the discipline of biology was born in 18th century Europe, enjoyed adolescence as morphology and comparative anatomy in the 19th century, and reached adulthood in the 20th century as the field of genetics. However, the late 19th century definition of genetics, heredity, as the science of variation and its causes is still valid. Thus, human genetics is the science of human variation, and medical genetics the science of abnormal human variation, and clinical genetics that branch of medicine that cares for individuals and families with abnormal variation of structure and function. In the late 19th century and early 20th centuries, the unity of morphology-based science was gradually replaced by a pluralistic view of biology that splintered the field into many different and often rivalrous disciplines. However, thanks to the application of novel molecular biological methods to the analysis of development and to the understanding of the materials of heredity, i.e., genes, the various branches of biology are being reunited. This new discipline, themed molecular morphology, may be defined as the study of the form, formation, transformation, and malformation of living organisms. Indeed, ignorant as they may be of the traditional methods of historiography, geneticists have developed their own brilliant and highly effective methods. Consequently, they have achieved a perspective remarkably longer and much better documented than that of historians. This nearly 4 billion year perspective unites living organisms into a single web of life, related to one another in unbroken descent to a common ancestor. This makes the phylogenetic, aka the genetic relationships of different species to one another, and the ontogenetic, aka the genetic basis for the development of individual organisms, perspectives of development not only complementary but inseparable. Thus, it is now possible to effectively explore a key question of biology of the 19th and 20th centuries. What is the relationship between evolution and development? In 1945, the University of Utah established the Laboratory of the Study of Hereditary and Metabolic Disorders, later called the Laboratory of Human Genetics. Here, an outstanding group of scientists performed pioneering studies on clefts of lips and palate, muscular dystrophy, albinism, deafness, heredity polyposis of the colon, Gardner syndrome, and familial breast cancer. These predecessors would be enormously proud of their current peers at the University of Utah, whose successes have advanced knowledge in every aspect of the field of genetics. In their attempts to synthesize the story of genetics and its applications to human variability, health and disease, development, and cancer, the authors of this text have succeeded admirably. This concise, well-written, and illustrated, carefully edited, and indexed book is highly recommended to undergraduate students, new graduate students, medical students, genetic counseling students, nursing students, and students in the allied health sciences. Importantly, it is also a wonderful text for practicing physicians, primary care providers, and specialists who want an authoritative introduction to the basis and principles of modern genetics as applied to human health and development. This text, by distinguished and internationally respected colleagues and friends who love to teach, is a joy to read in its expression of enthusiasm and of wonder, which Aristotle said was the beginning of all knowledge. Einstein once said, the most incomprehensible thing about the world is that it is comprehensible. When I began to work in the field of medical genetics, the gene was widely viewed as incomprehensible. Indeed, some scientists, such as Goldschmidt, cast doubt on the very existence of the gene, although the great American biologist E.B. Wilson had predicted its chemical nature more than 100 years previously. In this text, genes and their function in health and disease are made comprehensible in a manner that should have wide appeal to all. Preface. Medical genetics is a rapidly progressing field. No textbook can remain factually current for long, for we have attempted to emphasize the central principles of genetics and their clinical application. In particular, this textbook integrates recent developments in molecular genetics and genomics with clinical practice. This new edition maintains the format and presentation that were well received in 3 previous editions. Basic principles of molecular biology are introduced early in the book so that they can be discussed and applied in subsequent chapters. The chapters on autosomal and X-linked disorders include updated discussions of topics such as genomic imprinting, anticipation, and expanded trinucleotide repeats. The chapter on cytogenetics highlights important advances in this area, including comparative genomic hybridization and newly described microdeletion syndromes. Gene mapping and identification, which constitute a central focus of modern medical genetics, are treated at length, and recent advances made based on completion of the Human Genome Project are discussed. Chapters are included on the rapidly developing fields of immunogenetics and cancer genetics. Considerable discussion is devoted to the genetics of common adult diseases such as heart disease, diabetes, stroke, and hypertension. The book concludes with chapters on genetic diagnosis, again emphasizing current molecular approaches such as microarray analysis, gene therapy, personalized medicine, and clinical genetics and genetic counseling. As in previous editions, a website is available to provide access to continually changing information in medical genetics. The website includes downloadable versions of all the figures in the textbook, many additional patient photographs, hyperlinks to other relevant sites, and a battery of test questions and answers. Several pedagogical aids are incorporated in this book. And then there's a bunch of descriptions. Guess we'll go through them. Clinical commentary boxes present detailed coverage of the most important genetic diseases and provide examples of modern clinical management. Mini summaries, highlighted in red, are placed on nearly every page to help the reader understand and summarize important concepts. Study questions provided at the end of each chapter assist the reader in review and comprehension. A detailed glossary is included at the end of the book. Key terms are emphasized in boldface. Important references are listed at the end of each chapter. Many major additions have been incorporated into this edition. All chapters have been thoroughly updated with special attention given to rapidly changing topics such as genetic diagnosis, gene therapy, cancer genetics, and the genetics of other common diseases. A new chapter entitled Genetics and Personalized Medicine has been added. More than 100 new clinical photographs and figures have been added or updated. To facilitate the creation of illustrations for teaching purposes, all images on the website can now be downloaded. An expanded comprehensive index includes all text citations to all diseases. This textbook evolved from courses we teach for medical students, nursing students, genetic counseling students, and graduate and undergraduate students in human genetics. These students are the primary audience for this book, but it should be useful for house staff, physicians, and other healthcare professionals who wish to become more familiar with medical genetics. And we're skipping the table of contents. And then we're at Chapter 1, Background and History. Genetics is playing an increasingly important role in the practice of clinical medicine. Medical genetics, once largely confined to relatively rare conditions seen by only a few specialists, is now becoming a central component to our understanding of most major diseases. These include not only the pediatric diseases, but also common adult diseases such as heart disease, diabetes, many cancers, and many psychiatric disorders. Because all components of the human body are influenced by genes, genetic disease is relevant to all medical specialties. Today's healthcare practitioners must understand the science of medical genetics. What is medical genetics? Medical genetics involves any application to genetics to medical practice. It thus includes studies of the inheritance of diseases in families, mapping of disease genes to specific locations on chromosomes, analyses of the molecular mechanisms through which genes cause disease, and the diagnosis and treatment of genetic disease. As a result of rapid progress in molecular genetics, DNA-based diagnosis is available for hundreds of inherited conditions, and gene therapy, the insertion of normal genes into patients in order to correct genetic disease, is showing promise for some conditions. Medical genetics also includes genetic counseling, in which information regarding risks, prognosis, and treatments is communicated to patients and their families. Why is the knowledge of medical genetics important for today's healthcare practitioner? There are several reasons healthcare practitioners must understand medical genetics. Genetic diseases make up a large percentage of the total disease burden in pediatric and adult populations. This percentage will continue to grow as our understanding of the genetic basis of disease grows. In addition, modern medicine is placing increasing emphasis on prevention. Because genetics provides a basis for understanding the fundamental biological makeup of the organism, it naturally leads to a better understanding of the disease process. In some cases, this knowledge can lead to prevention of the disorder. It also leads to more effective disease treatment. Prevention and effective treatment are among the highest goals of medicine. The chapters that follow provide many examples of the ways genetics contributes to these goals. But first, this chapter reviews the foundations upon which current practice is built. A brief history. The inheritance of physical traits has been a subject of curiosity and interest for thousands of years. The ancient Hebrews and Greeks, as well as later medieval scholars, described many genetic phenomena and proposed theories to account for them. Many of these theories were incorrect. Gregor Mendel, an Austrian monk who is usually considered the father of genetics, advanced the field significantly by performing a series of cleverly designed experiments on living organisms, the garden peas. He then used this experimental information to formulate a series of fundamental principles of heredity. Mendel published the results of his experiments in 1865 in a relatively obscure journal. It is one of the ironies of biological science that his discoveries, which still form the foundation of genetics, received little recognition for 35 years. At about the same time, Charles Darwin formulated theories of evolution, and Darwin's cousin, Francis Galton, performed an extensive series of family studies, concentrating especially on twins, in an effort to understand the influence of heredity on various human traits. Neither scientist was aware of Mendel's work. Genetics, as it is known today, is largely the result of research performed during the 20th century. Mendel's principles were independently rediscovered in 1900 by 3 different scientists working in 3 different countries. This was also the year in which Landsteiner discovered the ABO blood group system. In 1902, Archibald Garrod described alkaptonuria as the first inborn error of metabolism. In 1909, Johansen coined the term gene to denote the basic unit of heredity. The next several decades were a period of considerable experimental and theoretical work. Several organisms, including fruit flies and bread mold, serve as useful experimental systems in which to study the actions and interactions of genes. For example, H.J. Mueller, demonstrated the genetic consequences of ionizing radiation in the fruit fly. During this period, much of the theoretical basis of population genetics was developed by three central figures: Ronald Fisher, J.B.S. Haldane, and Sewell Wright. In addition, the modes of inheritance of several important genetic diseases, including phenylketonuria, sickle cell disease, Huntington disease, and cystic fibrosis, were established. In 1944, Oswald Avery showed that genes are composed of DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. Probably the most significant achievement of the 1950s was the specification of the physical structure of DNA by James Watson and Francis Crick in 1953. Their seminal paper, which was only 1 page long, formed the basis of what is now known as molecular genetics, the study of the structure and function of genes at the molecular level. Another significant accomplishment in that decade was the correct specification of the number of human chromosomes. Since the early 1920s, it had been thought that humans had 48 chromosomes in each cell. Only in 1956 was the correct number, 46, finally determined. The ability to count and identify chromosomes led to a flurry of new findings in cytogenetics, including the discovery in 1959 that Down syndrome is caused by an extra copy of chromosome 21. Technological developments since 1960 brought about significant achievements at an ever-increasing rate. The most spectacular advances have occurred in the field of molecular genetics. Thousands of genes have been mapped to specific chromosome locations. The Human Genome Project, a large collaborative venture, began in 1990. Provided the complete human DNA sequence in 2003, fairly recent actually. The term genome refers to all of the DNA in an organism. Important developments in computer technology have helped to decipher the barrage of data being generated by this and related projects. In addition to mapping genes, molecular geneticists have pinpointed the molecular defects underlying a number of important genetic diseases. This research has contributed greatly to our understanding of the ways gene defects can cause disease, opening paths to more effective treatment and potential cures. The next decade promises to have a time of great excitement and fulfillment. So, 2003 was the Human Genome Project, and when it says next decade, let's just say 10 years from 2003. That's 2013. So that's we're quite past 2013 right now. I don't know where the whole thing is at the moment, but there's definitely still a lot of research still going on. And let's see, let's just keep going. But for anyone joining this stream right now, thank you for joining. I wish I could call you out individually, but we got reading to do, so I'll call you out when we get a break in between. Types of genetic diseases. Humans are estimated to have approximately 20,000 to 25,000 genes. Alterations in these genes, or in combinations of them, can produce genetic disorders. These disorders are classified into several major groups: chromosome disorders, single gene disorders, multifactorial disorders, or mitochondrial disorders. Chromosome disorders, in which entire chromosomes or large segments of them are missing, duplicated, or otherwise altered. These disorders include diseases such as Down syndrome and Turner syndrome. Single gene disorders, disorders in which single genes are altered. These are often termed Mendelian conditions. Well-known examples include cystic fibrosis, sickle cell disease, and hemophilia. Multifactorial disorders, which result from a combination of multiple genetic and environmental causes. Many birth defects such as cleft lip and cleft palate as well as many adult disorders, including heart disease and diabetes, belong in this category. Mitochondrial disorders. A relatively small number of diseases caused by alterations in the small cytoplasmic mitochondrial chromosome. The mitochondria, if just a side note, is the tiny little cells that reside, the organelles that reside in your cells. Some might say these are from prehistoric bacteria living in our cells and providing energy for us. But that's a separate topic for another time. Of these major classes of diseases, the single gene disorders have probably received the greatest amount of attention. These disorders are classified according to the way they are inherited in families: autosomal dominant, autosomal recessive, or X-linked. These modes of inheritance are discussed extensively in later chapters. The first edition of McCusick's Mendelian Inheritance in Man, published in 1966, listed only 1,368 autosomal traits and 119 X-linked traits. Today, the online version of McCusick's compendium lists more than 19,000 entries, of which more than 18,000 are autosomal. More than 1,000 are X-linked, 57 are Y-linked, and 63 are in the mitochondrial genome. So, just so we probably out of the scope of an ASMR, but just so we're on the same page, X-linked diseases can affect both men and women, but they will probably affect men more because men only have one X chromosome while women have two X chromosomes typically. And if one X chromosome is affected in a woman, they are not as affected by X-linked diseases. They can be affected to a degree, but it is not as severe as for men who only have one X chromosome. Y-linked diseases will pretty much only affect men because men are the only ones with the Y chromosomes. So, just a side note there, but out of the scope of an ASMR. With continued advances, these numbers are certain to increase. Although some genetic disorders, particularly the single gene conditions, are strongly determined by genes, many others are the result of multiple genetic and non-genetic factors. One can therefore think of genetic diseases as lying on a continuum, with disorders such as cystic fibrosis and Duchenne muscular dystrophy situated at one end, strongly determined by their genes, and conditions such as measles situated on the other end, strongly determined by the environment. Many of the most prevalent disorders, including many birth defects and many common diseases such as diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, and cancer, lie somewhere in the middle of the continuum. These diseases are the products of varying degrees of genetic and environmental influences. The clinical impact of genetic disease. Genetic diseases are sometimes perceived as so rare that the average healthcare practitioner will seldom encounter them. That is far from the truth. That is far from the truth. That this is far from the truth is becoming increasingly evident as knowledge and technology progress. Less than a century ago, diseases of largely non-genetic causation, caused by malnutrition, unsanitary conditions, and pathogens, accounted for the great majority of deaths in children. During the 20th century, however, public health vastly improved. As a result, genetic diseases have come to account for an ever-increasing percentage of deaths among children in developed countries. For example, the percentage of pediatric deaths due to genetic causes in various hospitals in the United Kingdom increased from 16.5% in 1914 to 50% in 1976. In addition to contributing to a large fraction of childhood deaths, genetic diseases also account for a large share of admissions to pediatric hospitals. For example, a survey of Seattle hospitals showed that 27% of all pediatric inpatients presented with a genetic disorder, and a survey of admissions to a major pediatric hospital in Mexico showed that 37.8% involved a disease that was either genetic or partly genetic. Another way to assess the importance of genetic diseases is to ask what fraction of persons in the population will be found to have a genetic disorder. This is not a simple question as it might seem. A variety of factors can influence the answer. For example, some diseases are found more frequently in certain ethnic groups. Cystic fibrosis is especially common among whites or Caucasians, whereas sickle cell disease is especially common among Africans. Some diseases are more common in older persons. For example, colon cancer, breast cancer, and Alzheimer's diseases are caused by dominant genes in a small fraction, about 5 to 10% of cases, but are not usually manifested until later in life. The prevalence estimates for those genetic diseases would be higher in an older population. Variations in diagnostic and recording practices can also cause prevalence estimates to vary. Accordingly, the prevalence figures are given as a rather broad range. Keeping these sources of variation in mind, it is notable that a recognizable genetic disease will be diagnosed in 3 to 7% of the population at some point. This tabulation does not include most cases of the more common adult diseases such as heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. Although it is known that these diseases have genetic components, diseases also have genetic components. If such diseases are included, the clinical impact of genetic disease is considerable indeed. And that's actually the entirety of Chapter 1. Got about a minute left for the science portion, but I don't think I'm going to go to Chapter 2 for now. But yeah, that's a quick look at the book. I know it's mostly words and you can't see anything, but you know what? That's the tables and graphs in this book are just basically a lot more detail than what we can cover. And this is actually the most readable of all my textbooks that I have, because I have one book that's all calculations. Another one is just basically a test prep guide for certification. And I think I had another book also. Oh yeah, bioinformatics, but that one was given to me recently, so that's a different story. Fridge analogy. I haven't heard of the fridge analogy. What's the fridge analogy? I guess we can discuss that. What's the fridge analogy? I don't think I've heard about that one. But yeah, while we have a chance right now, specifically those are the ones in chat that I can see. Thank you, Dad. Thank you, VTuber Dad, for dropping by. Thank you, Marimo, for dropping by. Thank you, Kaiku, for dropping by. Thank you, Doc Redfang, for dropping by. This is quite the odd ASMR stream, I'll admit for sure. This is not your typical ASMR stream to begin with. That was a joke. Okay. What was the fridge analogy in reference to when I was reading? I didn't catch it because I was too busy looking down at the book. But yeah, if I remember that, I don't know where we were at that point, to be honest. But yeah, I think that's it for the science reading for now. I don't know if this is something we want to do again as far as the science reading is concerned. I'm not sure if the science reading is something we would like to do again, but if it is, let me know in the comments or let me know in the in Twitter once I get the thank you post up later. The mitochondria is oh yeah, because the coils, right? The coils in the mitochondria, they look like fridge coils. That's probably why. And why are my glasses shiny? They should not be shiny. Yeah, mitochondria is the power core and lysosomes, peroxisomes doing things in the fridge. Yeah. There's also that thing about the mitochondria being, well, there's a theory. It's a theory that the mitochondria might also have been ancient bacteria that somehow got into human cells way back when, or animal cells in general. Because here's the thing. So human DNA and mitochondrial DNA do not share the same type of DNA. Your DNA, your personal DNA, is very different from the DNA that your mitochondria have. And mitochondria, if I'm not mistaken, also replicate by themselves. They are not made by the genes in your body. Someone correct me on that, but that's what I vaguely remember. But yeah. So mitochondrial DNA is only traceable through the mother for one reason or another. I do not know why. Mitochondrial DNA. If you take the DNA of a mitochondria, it should match. It should match whatever your mother's mitochondrial DNA is, but it will not match your father's DNA because your father's DNA came from his mother's mitochondrial DNA. So where the mitochondria came from, no one exactly knows. But apparently it's a whole thing by itself in your own cells. So essentially, we have a foreign body that's part of our body in our cells. If you want to take that theory at face value. I don't know how much of it is true. It's just a theory. No one knows. But so far, it's the one that you hear the most. So there, a little less on the mitochondria that you may or may not know. But let's move on to the next thing. I'm not sure if I'm good enough to teach science. Maybe one of these days, if we have enough people, I can probably teach some basic science. But for now, ASMR science book reading is the best I can do. And this thing does not like to scroll all the way. I guess I'm going to have to make this longer. There we go. Maybe I'll just do this also. Oh, nope, that's not what you should be doing. That's not what you should be doing. OBS, I just wanted to put a line there. Can I just put a line? There we go. Line put. But yeah, mitochondria are basically aliens in your body. That's the gist of it. They're aliens. All right, so we're going to be doing Aesop's Fable next, another 30 minutes. I'm just getting this from the Library of Congress, so this is publicly available. If you want the titles of the books that we are reading, they are going to be in the description below. So you can refer to that if you want to take a look at them. The textbook, though, is a paid thing, and this is what I got like years ago. I'm not going to say specifically how long because that's going to reveal my age. Though if I am admitting that I went to grad school, I guess that reveals my age a little bit. But yeah, anyway. But I'm not going to say specifically how long ago I got this. Just know I got it quite a while back, and I don't know what edition we are on it right now. It's probably still the 4th edition. It might be the 5th edition. It might be the 8th edition. I don't know. But anyway, we're going to do the Aesop's Fable next from the Library of Congress. So timer is on my side. And starting again. I need to put chat at this side also. The Aesop for children. We are starting with the frogs and the ox. I don't know most of these stories, so this is going to be also new for me. An ox came down to a reedy pool to drink. As he splashed heavily into the water, he crushed a young frog into the mud. The old frog soon missed the little one and asked his brothers and sisters what had become of him. "A big monster," said one of them, "stepped on little brother with one of his huge feet." "Big was he?" said the old frog, puffing herself up. "Was he as big as this?" "Oh, much bigger," they cried. The frog puffed still some more. "He could have not been bigger than this," she said. But the little frogs all declared that the monster was much, much bigger, and the old frog kept puffing herself out more and more until all at once she burst. Do not attempt the impossible. I suppose that's the lesson of this story. Okay. There's no lesson there except don't attempt the impossible. What the heck was Aesop on anyway? Next story. Belling the Cat. The mice once called a meeting to decide on a plan to free themselves of their enemy, the cat. At least they wished to find some way of knowing when she was coming, so they might have time to run away. Indeed, something had to be done, for they lived in such constant fear of her claws that they hardly dared stir from their dens by night or day. Many plans were discussed, but none of them was thought good enough. At last, a young mouse got up and said, "I have a plan that seems very simple, but I know it will be successful. All we have to do is hang a bell around the cat's neck. When we hear the bell ringing, we will know immediately that our enemy is coming." All the mice were much surprised that they had not thought of such a plan before. But in the midst of rejoicing over their good fortune, an old mouse arose and said, "I will say that the plan of the young mouse is very good. But let me ask one question. Who will bell the cat?" It is one thing to say that something should be done, but quite a different matter to do it. This is very true. This is very, very true. This might be a good idea, but it's easier said than done most times. The Town Mouse and the Country Mouse. A town mouse once visited a relative who lived in the country. For lunch, the country mouse served wheat stalks, roots, and acorns with a dash of cold water for drink. The town mouse ate very sparingly, nibbling a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And by her manner of making it, very plain that she ate the simple food only to be polite. After the meal, the friends had a long talk, or rather, the town mouse talked about her life in the city, while the country mouse listened. Then they went to bed in a cozy nest in the hedgerow and slept in quiet and comfort until morning. In her sleep, the country mouse dreamed she was a town mouse with all the luxuries and delights of the city life that her friend had described for her. So the next day, when the town mouse asked the country mouse to go home with her to the city, she gladly said yes. When they reached the mansion in which the town mouse lived, they found on the table in the dining room the leavings of a very fine banquet. There were sweetmeats and jellies, pastries, delicious cheeses, indeed, the most tempting foods that a mouse can imagine. But just as the country mouse was about to nibble a dainty bit of pastry, she heard a cat mew loudly and scratch at the door. In great fear, the mice scurried to a hiding place, where they lay quite still for a long time, hardly daring to breathe. When at last they ventured back to the feast, the door opened suddenly and in came the servants to clear the table, followed by the house dog. The country mouse stopped in the town mouse den only long enough to pick up her carpet and umbrella. "You may have luxuries and dainties that I have not," she said as she hurried away, "but I prefer my plain food and simple life in the country with the peace and security that go with it. Poverty with security is better than plenty in the midst of fear and uncertainty." What does that mean? I guess I guess sometimes a simple life is better than the hustle bustle in the city. That's one way to look at it. Yes, the city might have more things to offer, but is it worth it sometimes? Is it worth it? Sometimes the simple life in the country is a lot better than the glitz and glamour of what a city might be. I guess that's one way to look at it. Also, a very, very simple way to look at it is the grass is greener on the other side, until you find out it's really not that green. Okay, well, moving on. The Fox and the Grapes. A fox one day spied a beautiful bunch of ripe grapes hanging from a vine trained from the branches of a tree. The grapes seemed ready to burst with juice, and the fox's mouth watered as he gazed longingly at them. The bunch hung from a high branch, and the fox had to jump for it. The first time he jumped, he missed it by a long way. So he walked off a short distance and took a running leap at it, only to fall short once more. Again and again he tried, but in vain. Now he sat down and looked at the grapes in disgust. "What a fool I am," he said. "Here I am wearing myself out to get a bunch of sour grapes that are not worth gaping for." And off he walked very, very scornfully. There are many who pretend to despise and belittle that which is beyond their reach. I don't quite get this one. I guess this is something along the lines of aiming for something that you know is unattainable, but going for it anyway, knowing that you'll never get it. I think that's what it is. That's my interpretation of it, but I'm not quite sure if that's how it's supposed to be read. Oh well, we'll leave it. We'll leave it at that. We'll leave it at that. The Wolf and the Crane. A wolf had been feasting too greedily, and a bone had stuck crosswise in his throat. He could get it neither up nor down, and of course he could not eat a thing. Naturally, that was an awful state of affairs for a greedy wolf. So away he hurried to the crane. He was sure that she, with her long neck and bill, would easily be able to reach the bone and pull it out. "I will reward you very handsomely," said the wolf, "if you pull that bone out for me." The crane, as you can imagine, was very uneasy about putting her head in a wolf's throat. But she was grasping in nature, so she did what the wolf asked her to do. When the wolf felt that the bone was gone, he started to walk away. "But what about my reward?" called the crane anxiously. "What?" snarled the wolf, whirling around. "Haven't you got it? Isn't it enough that I let you take your head out of my mouth without snapping it off?" Expect no reward for serving the wicked. This is true. Because, well, this is quite true. If you do something good for someone who is not trustworthy, either expect to be backstabbed or not get anything for your efforts. I suppose those are two ways to look at that. Let's see, I've read The Fox and Grapes as the fox being someone who fails to achieve what they wanted, and so they decide that what they wanted actually sucks, so they could feel better when they didn't have it. That's also another way to look at it. And quite true for a lot of people. I think it's also very relevant in what we're doing right now, especially. Um, let's just speak broadly instead of specifically what we are right now. Broadly speaking, some people try to be a content creator, like fail to achieve popularity or widespread fame as what they would have seen in other people. I think we can all feel that to one degree or another, and eventually maybe give it up, saying it wasn't worth it, and it it was a waste of time, effort, money, whatever you want to put into it, and feel better once they leave it. But you know what? I if it's not for you, I guess it's not for you. Same feeling for the grapes that the fox is trying to get. I don't know. There's definitely a bunch of different ways, and I'm just trying to formulate things as I go along. But the wolf and the crane. Definitely don't expect anything back for serving someone not trustworthy to begin with. The worst that it can do is backstab you. The best thing that can happen is probably nothing. And if they do repay you better than nothing, well, be very, very wary because they're going to have you on a string, most likely. Next one. These go pretty fast. The Lion and the Mouse. A lion lay asleep in the forest, his great head resting on his paws. A timid little mouse came upon him unexpectedly, and in her fright and haste to get away, ran across the lion's nose. Roused from his nap, the lion laid his huge paw angrily on the tiny creature to kill her. "Spare me," begged the poor mouse. "Please let me go, and someday I will surely repay you." The lion was much amused to think that the mouse would ever help him, but he was generous and finally let the mouse go. Some days later, while stalking his prey in the forest, the lion was caught in the toils of a hunter's net. Unable to free himself, he filled the forest with his angry roaring. The mouse knew the voice and quickly found the lion struggling in the net. Running to one of the great ropes that bound him, she gnawed it until it parted, and soon the lion was free. "You laughed when I said I would repay you," said the mouse. "Now you see that even a mouse can help a lion. A kindness is never wasted." Now, this story I've actually heard before. The lesson of the story I have not heard before, but you can probably kind of see how that would go. Now, in a perfect world, that would be ideal. If you do kindness unto others, you would probably get kindness back, but don't always expect kindness back. But you know what? It happens. Maybe not always, but it happens, and be grateful when it happens, because you might be in a huge bind, so to say, when it does. All right, next one. These go very, very fast. How many are there? The Gnat and the Bull. A gnat flew over the meadow with much buzzing for so small a creature and settled on the tip of one of the horns of a bull. After he had rested a short time, he made ready to fly away. But before he left, he begged the bull's pardon for having used his horn for a resting place. "You must be very glad to have me go now," he said. "It's all the same to me," replied the bull. "I did not even know you were there." We are often of greater importance in our own eyes than the eyes of our neighbor. The smaller the mind, the greater the conceit. I'm not sure about conceit, or the use of the word conceit. But, I guess in a way, something that might seem inconsequential in general might be magnified to being something offensive to someone else, either famous or not. Famous or not. Just in general, if you think you're being a bother to someone, but you're actually not, you might think you're being a bother, while the other person would be thinking I don't mind. You do you, as long as you're not bothering me, right? I guess the gnat's that small to the bull, where it's not actually bothering them. I don't know. That's a mess. That's a messy analysis. That's a very messy analysis. And I'm not quite sure the use of the word conceit either. The smaller the mind, the greater the conceit. Not sure about the use of that word there, but I get the meaning. I get the meaning. But I guess, yeah, that's a tough one. That's a tough one to understand. The plane tree. Plane as in Plane. Plane tree. Two travelers walking in the noonday sun sought the shade of a spreading tree to rest. As they lay looking up among the pleasant leaves, they saw that it was a plane tree. "How useless is the plane," said one of them. "It bears no fruit whatever, and only serves to litter the ground with leaves." "Ungrateful creature," said a voice from the plane tree. "You lie there in my cooling shade, and you say I am useless? Thus ungratefully, O Jupiter, do men receive their blessings. Our best blessings are often the least appreciated ones." And this is quite true. Quite true. Just because something seems useless doesn't mean it always is. Especially if you're using one of said things' functions. Might not be the most useful thing, but it's, you know what? If you're still using it, can you really call it useless? Can't think of an example off the top of my head. But a tree providing shade and no fruit. It's probably a good enough example for this. But yeah, I can't think of one in particular. But yeah, well, let's just say this. Probably not a good example because there's definitely pitfalls in this analogy. No, I'm not gonna go there. I'm not gonna go there. Go there. All right, next. The owl and the grasshopper. The owl always takes her sleep during the day. Then after sundown, when the rosy light fades from the sky and the shadows rise slowly through the wood, out she comes ruffling and blinking from the old hollow tree. Now her weird whoo, whoo, whoo echoes through the quiet wood, and she begins her hunt for the bugs and beetles and frogs and mice she likes to eat. She likes to well to eat, so well to eat. Now there was a certain old owl who had become very cross and hard to please as she grew older, especially if anything disturbed her daily slumbers. One summer afternoon, as she dozed away in her den in the old oak tree, a grasshopper nearby began a joyous but very raspy song. Out popped the old owl's head from the opening in the tree that served her both for door and for window. "Get away from here, sir," she said to the grasshopper. "Have you no manners? You should at least respect my age and leave me to sleep in quiet." But the grasshopper answered saucily that he had as much right to his place in the sun as the owl had to her place in the old oak. Then he struck up a louder and still more rasping tune. The wise old owl knew quite well that it would do no good to argue with the grasshopper, nor with anybody else for that matter. Besides, her eyes were not sharp enough by day to permit her to punish the grasshopper as he deserved. So she laid aside all her hard words and spoke very kindly to him. "Well, sir," she said, "if I must stay awake, I am going to settle right down to enjoy your singing. Now that I think of it, I have a wonderful wine here sent me from Olympus, of which I am told Apollo drinks before he sings to the high gods. Please come up and taste this delicious drink with me. I know it will make you sing like Apollo himself." The foolish grasshopper was taken in by the owl's flattering words. Up he jumped to the owl's den, but as soon as he was near enough to the old owl, so that the old owl could see him clearly, she pounced upon him and ate him up. Flattery is not a proof of admiration. Do not let flattery throw you off your guard against an enemy. Oh, so true. So true. I don't think I've been victim to this personally. Just because I hate flattery in general. I hate accepting flattery and I hate giving flattery. But just because someone flatters you, don't let that take off your guard, especially if it hits the right tone in your ears. Now, whenever I compliment someone, that's not flattery. That's I don't know what is the definition of flattery. What is the definition of flattery? It's usually what, from just off the top of my head, flattery is a false words of praise. Correct? At least that's what I think. I don't do that. At least I hope I don't do that. If I do, well, call me out on it, please. Call me out on that. Whenever I do give praise or flirting with someone, that is either playful or sincere, one of the two, but not what do you call this? Not false. At least I would hope so. At least I would hope so. But yeah, beware of flattery. Do not don't fall for it just because someone says nice words to you. It could just be a trap of some sort, either to pull you in or let you guard down. One or the other, or both. The oak and the reeds. A giant oak stood near a brook in which grew some slender reeds. When the wind blew, the great oak stood proudly upright in its with its 100 arms uplifted to the sky. But the reeds bowed low in the wind, and sang a sad and mournful song. You have reason to complain, said the oak. The slightest breeze that ruffles the surface of the water makes you bow your heads, while I, the mighty oak, stand upright and firm before the howling tempest. Do not worry about us, replied the reeds. The winds do not harm us. We bow before them, and so we do not break. You, in all your pride and strength, have so far resisted their blows. But the end is coming. As the reeds spoke, a great hurricane rushed out of the north. The oak stood proudly and fought against the storm, while the yielding reeds bowed low. The wind redoubled in fury, and all at once a great tree fell, torn up by the roots, and lay among the pitying reeds. Better to yield when it is folly to resist, than to resist stubbornly and be destroyed. Holy crap. Yes. Know when to back down. Fighting is not always the option. Fight when you can win. But if it looks like you're about to lose, just back down. Sometimes it's not worth fighting. There are things to fight for, true, but back down when it's not worth. That's, I think, something that some people could learn, for sure. And it's one lesson I learned a long time ago. The Crow and the Pitcher. Oh, this sounds familiar. In a spell of dry weather, when the birds could find very little to drink, a thirsty crow found a pitcher with a little water in it. But the pitcher was high and had a narrow neck, and no matter how he tried, the crow could not reach the water. The poor thing felt as if he must die of thirst. Then an idea came to him. Picking up some small pebbles, he dropped them into the pitcher one by one. With each pebble, the water rose a little higher until at last it was near enough so he could drink. In a pinch, a good use of your wits may help us out. Just because something seems hopeless, uh, stay calm, think, and if there's a way out, try it out. I guess that's one way to look at it. But yeah, it's no good panicking in a tough situation. I guess in this situation, the tough situation is can't get water. So what do? We put rocks in there until it gets to the top, though one would question how clean the rocks are compared to the water you're drinking after you put rocks in there, but that's beside the point. That's beside the point. Point is stay calm, think if you're in a tough situation, and see if there's a way out. If there's no way out, then I guess you're screwed. All right, next. And I have heard that story before, actually. Oh, 4 minutes left. Okay. The two goats. Two goats frisking gaily on the rocky steeps of a mountain valley chanced to meet, one on each side of the deep chasm through which poured a mighty mountain torrent. The trunk of a fallen tree formed the only means of crossing the chasm, and on this not even two squirrels could have passed each other in safety. The narrow path would have made the bravest tremble. Not so our goats. Their pride would not permit either to stand aside for the other. One set her foot on the log, the other did likewise. In the middle they met horn to horn. Neither would give way, and so they both fell, to be swept away by the roaring torrent below. It is better to yield than to come to misfortune through stubbornness. Yes, this is true. Can't think of a particular example off the top of my head, but if two stubborn people fight over one thing and neither yield on the subject, it's never going to get anywhere. Now, whether or not it's going to come to misfortune through stubbornness, that's debatable. It could just be a stalemate for a very, very long time. That's probably the best outcome. The worst outcome would be the misfortune, whatever that misfortune would result in. I think also Dr. Seuss did the same thing in one of his stories, using this as the basis of it. There's like I think I forgot what exactly, but there were like two beings, one walking one direction, another one walking the other direction. Same thing with the goats, crossing the tree. The thing with Dr. Seuss though is these two things that pretty much met with each other and had the option to step one side or the other to get around each other, but they didn't do that. So in a way, they're kind of like the two goats here. I forgot which story it was exactly, but Dr. Seuss did a similar one. So the wild boar and the fox. A wild boar was sharpening his tusks busily against the stump of a tree when a fox happened by. Now the fox was always looking for a chance to make fun of his neighbors, so he made a great show of looking anxiously about, as if in fear of some hidden enemy. But the boar kept right on with his work. "Why are you doing that?" asked the fox at last with a grin. "There isn't any danger that I can see." "True enough," replied the boar. "But when danger does come, there will not be time for such work as this. My weapons will have to be ready for use then, or I shall suffer for it. Preparedness for war is the best guarantee of peace." Yes, and I suppose, though it is sad that we would have to resort to that, literally speaking. One day, we hope for such things to not happen. It's not the reality of this world. We have 45 seconds left. Let me see how long the next one is. We'll go through it. The heron. A heron was walking sedately along the bank of a stream, his eyes on the clear water, and his long neck and pointed bill ready to snap up like a a likely morsel for his breakfast. The clear water swarmed with fish, but Master Heron was hard to please that morning. "No small fry for me," he said. "Such scanty fare is not fit for a heron." Now a fine young perch swam near. "No, indeed," said the heron. "I wouldn't even trouble to open my beak for anything like that." As the sun rose, the fish left the shallow water near the shore and swam below into the cool depths towards the meadow. The heron saw no more fish, and very glad was he at last to breakfast on a tiny snail. Don't be too hard to suit, or you may have to be content with the worst or with nothing at all. This is also true. So, I guess we've been in times where at least trying for something better each time before grabbing something. I think the most recent example, let's just use me as an example for this. During the Paspato streams, when someone came with a good offer and I just kept saying, "Can you go higher? Can you go higher? Can you go higher?" And then they eventually went lower. And there were a couple of times, especially in that last act, where I pretty much lost them completely because I wouldn't even take their lowest offer and I thought I could get someone else nearby. And then as soon as someone else came by, I had to just sell for whatever, or I had to scrap something because it took too long for someone else to come by to buy the painting. So yeah, you could always do better, but just think of the situation where you may not get anything at all, or worse. But nothing is probably the worst situation, right? But anyway, that is it for our ASMR reading. I don't know how ASMR it was. Uh, to be honest, I honestly don't know how these things are supposed to work. But yeah, I think that's as good as I can do for the ASMR today. If you have any feedback, leave me a comment in the uh, after this stream is over, either here on YouTube or Twitter, and let me know. Let me know what you like, what you didn't like, suggestions for future readings, stuff like that. I'll think about probably doing this every so often. This is definitely not going to be a regular thing. It could be. It could be. I don't know. Did it really work as well as some people suggested it might? I honestly don't know. Apparently, under the right conditions, my voice could probably be used for ASMR-ish type things, but I just don't honestly know. You guys can tell me that better than I can. You guys can tell me that better than I can. But for today, we are done with the ASMR stream. Thank you very much for listening. Definitely no watching here, unless you just want to look at me. But thank you very much for listening, and tomorrow we will be continuing with Omori, Part 3. I guess this is not spoiler, so I'll go and say it. So, Part 3, we are in the Forest of Spiders. I think that's very apparent with the thumbnail that I posted up. But if you want to catch the continuation of the Omori streams, please drop by tomorrow. I'll be starting that at 3:30 p.m. Central. And let's see. So we'll be doing Omori on tomorrow, and we'll be also going on Friday. Apparently, the game is a lot longer than I thought it initially. One of the people that worked in the game told me it was only supposed to be for 15 plus hours. Lies. Lies. Another person in our server who also was playing Omori played it, did not do any side quests, and they still took at least 25 hours. 25. So, lies. And but yeah, well, we'll be picking up a No More again tomorrow. So if you want to catch some more of that, 3:30 p.m. Central, and we'll be going until about this time because it's a work day. It's a work day. On Friday though, I'll probably go a little bit longer if I can. But tomorrow's a work day, so yes. Anyway, thank you all for listening, and I hope you enjoyed that. Leave me a comment below or in Twitter once I get the thank you post up, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a good rest of your day, everyone. Yeah, and ending.